What is up, my friends? It is your host, Nick Anderson, also known as Amongst the Whiskey. And today, we're going to be getting to the bottom of bottle-to-bottle variation in the context of Stagg Junior 24C. Obviously, I have done a full review on batch 24C here, and it really just didn't resonate with me. I thought this was a hot mess express. Did not think it was one of the better Stagg Junior batches of recent times. What was interesting is I had a few people reach out after that review, and they said that they had a better experience with 24C than I was presenting in my reviews. So I met Dirty Bourbon through the whiskey Instagram community, and Dirty Bourbon sent me along a sample of their bottle of Stagg Junior 24C. So I could do a blind head-to-head and find out, are there differences between these two? In my original exploration of 24C, Jess and I looked at it in the context of batch 17. We found that batch 17 was fantastically better in quality than 24C. So I'm going to also include this in my blind flight today. Let's get these randomized, blinded, and put into Glencairns, and on with the tasting, baby. Sweet Staggy Stag, let us get on with it. First glass is the Buckhead Bourbon glass. Second glass is the Neat glass. And third glass is going to be the Bourbon Pursuit Glen. If you're interested in finding out what each of these are, I'll put a spoiler down in the description. On with the tasting. Buckhead Bourbon Glen, nice vanilla tones, good little bit of cherry going on here. I don't hate this already. This smells pretty good. Definitely has some good wood influence. You get your wood spice, your cinnamons, your nutmegs. There's definitely a good bit of toffee sweetness here. Whew. Deep inhales, there's definitely a bit of proofiness here. A little bit of ethanol in the nose. It tingles. Makes my eyes water a little bit. A little bit of black pepper, allspice, clove. All in all, not a bad nose. Freshen up a little bit. On to the Neat glass. Lighter. Not much aroma going on here. Okay, swirl of the glass. Definitely kicks up some unmitigated ethanol, more than the first Buckhead Bourbon Glen. Yeah. Just kind of off balance here on the nose, for sure. I kind of can smell some jagged subcomponents here. It's vaguely like a little bit of caramel and vanilla, your standard bourbon aromas, but I'm not really finding anything that's exceptional or standing out to me in the quality department. Yeah, just a mediocre nose on the Neat glass. And into the Bourbon Pursuit glass. Ooh, kind of a return to form here. There's some nice notes in here. Kind of. They're youthful. I get almost a bit of like a spruce bough. There's like this piney aroma. Kind of reminds me of cheap wood and Christmas time. Yeah, definitely some clove tones there too. Definitely getting a Christmas vibe out of this Bourbon Pursuit Glen. It's definitely got a little bit more volume than the Neat glass, but overall I'm not really crazy for the nose on this one either. Jumping back to the Buckhead Bourbon Glen. Okay, this is normalized to I think a bit more of the other profiles. Just getting maybe a touch of vinegar here. Can't quite put my finger on the nose there. Alright, I'm going to sip left to right. No special order here. On to the Buckhead Bourbon sip. Okay, a little bit fruit forward, but definitely a cherry hots. It's definitely fruit and spice. So I'm thinking hot tamales, cinnamon. It's okay. Yeah, it doesn't immediately wow me in any way. I'll have another sip. That was my first sip of the day, so I will venture into another taste. Yeah, just pretty good. Ooh, alright, lingers somewhat decent here. Definitely got a tingly mouth coating. Not super oily. It's kind of thin on the mouth coating. And definitely very tingly, very spice forward. A little bit of like mint, tarragon, maybe a little bit of expressed orange peel. It's not screaming complexity to me. I'm just going to call that okay. Alright, got my palate reset. Ready to move into the Neat glass. Way bigger, way bolder. Wow, that is just way, way, way more flavor. I'm not sure if there's a proof discrepancy between these batches. I don't have the bottles handy. I already stuck them over on the shelf. I won't let that influence my decision. This is a blind tasting after all, but immediately just get the sense that this is a way bolder whiskey in the neat glass compared to the Buckhead bourbon glass. Mouth feeling is way better. Mouth coating is good. It's thicker. It's a little more sticky. It's a little more viscous. I love that personally in a whiskey. Definitely getting more of those toffee tones, more of those creme brulee tones. Pretty solid Kentucky straight bourbon right here. Interesting, there's kind of a development into some citrusy fruit now, where I'm getting almost a lemon peel and a little bit of orange rind. In some ways I feel like I'm falling out of favor with this glass the more I sip it, which is sometimes just how it goes. Palate cleansed, let's move on to the Bourbon Pursuit Glen. Oh, that one's funky. Yeah, that one's really funky. There's like this plasticky component to it. Good nose. Just did something on my palate on that first sip. I took a very small sip, so let me go back in here. Okay. Kind of a butterscotchy thing going on here. There's this vague hint of fruitiness that's like trying to get through on the palate, but just can't. It's a little hot on the tongue. It's just messy, disjointed. It's got like this kind of pop rocks, but like fireworks. It's pop rocks, but they hurt. I don't think I like this one. Okay, yeah. A little bit of like vague fruitiness going on here, but it's just so imbalanced. I find myself just begging to reach for my glass of water that I have on my desk here, because that is so tannic, dry, messy, disjointed, discombobulated. Just really not a big fan on that. Based on that description, I'm thinking that's probably one of the 24C samples here, whether it's my bottle or it's the Dirty Bourbon sample that got sent to me. I don't know, but for me that feels like the experience that I had when I reviewed 24C. Now that I'm pretty confident on that one, I'm wondering about the other two glasses here. I'm going to go back in for one more taste of each and then present you with the blind results. All right, I'm going to go back to the beginning. Buckhead Bourbon Glen was my first sip of the three. Quick take on both glasses here without cleansing my palate. I don't recommend that, but I'm going to do it here for science. Yeah. Really quick hot take side by side. I think I'm liking that Buckhead Bourbon Glen probably the most. While early on in the experience, when I had my first sips of each, I did note that the neat glass was just bigger, just kind of attacked my palate. And I think that could be the fact that it's a more recent bottling. It has less time to oxidize, but it's just sharper and kind of disjointed on the palate as well. I'm thinking the neat Glen might be our other 24C batch. It's kind of just, it's giving me a little bit of indigestion, which again is kind of the experience I had when I reviewed 24C. So my palate feels pretty sharp today, but I'll go for one more taste here to see if I'm on the right track. Yeah, from a raw quality perspective, there's just a little bit too much unmitigated ethanol that is just rising through me. It's making me want to burp. It's giving me a little bit of like an upset stomach. I can just tell you that is a hallmark of not great whiskey. I don't think you need to be an expert taster by any means to understand that an upset stomach is probably a good sign that the whiskey's not great. Yeah, I'm not sure what it is about the neat glass. Maybe it feels a little youthful. It is maybe a little more tannic. There's definitely the just unmitigated alcohol portion that I'm tasting here. Doesn't feel like it's been fully matured to completion. Maybe a shortcut on cooperage, or maybe a rushed blend, which has been my running theory for 24C this whole time. I'm pretty confident that neat is going to be the other Stagg Junior batch 24C sample. At this point, I'm seeing the hallmarks between the neat glass and the Bourbon Pursuit glass. Yeah, the Bourbon Pursuit glass nose has really gone off the deep end. I liked it at the start. I just don't like anything about what I'm smelling in it now. I mean, it's okay. It's definitely Kentucky bourbon, but with the number of Kentucky bourbons that I've had, I can tell you that this just doesn't rank high on that scale. Yeah, both of these on the end here, the neat glass and the bourbon pursuit glass, they're just hard to drink. I'm not having a great time drinking these. But this wouldn't be a proper science experiment without one more sip of the Buckhead bourbon glass to just round out my feelings on this blind tasting. Let's get into it. I know already. That mouthfeel, the way that delivers, just silky, and I hate this word, but I'll use it here, smooth. Yeah, that is a hallmark of a great bourbon right there. My goodness, that, the way it just subtly lands on the tongue. It doesn't have to smack you in the face with flavor to be a great bourbon. You can very eloquently land on the tongue like a parachute, like a delicate parachute of flavor delivered at the right moment. This is that. This is creme brulee. This is vanilla toffee. This is everything that I look for in a great Kentucky bourbon. I mean, this is the only glass that I really find myself wanting to finish. So I'm going to do just that. That is Stagg Junior. And I'm going to galvanize my guess that that is batch 17. I mean, there is a league, there's a country mile of distance between this glass and the other two glasses. These two glasses are destined for the drain. I'm going to dump out the rest of these because it's just not worth my palate or liver to keep drinking. You guys ready for the reveal? Let's do it. In the Buckhead Bourbon Glen, I am going to try to show you live so you can watch my reaction. I'm going to show the camera which batch this is, and you will see first if I was correct or I was wrong. Let's see. Hey! Stagg Junior batch 17 in the Buckhead Bourbon Glen. I gotta say, my palate nailed that one today. I mean, this is a spectacular bourbon. There's a reason it got a great rating on amongstthewhiskey.com. I'll drop the review link in the description below. But my goodness, I mean, there was a country mile between these three whiskeys. I did prefer the Buckhead bourbon the best. I wonder if I presented this in a different order, if I might have got tripped up a little bit, because I really just had a bad time drinking, especially the Neat Glen. I'm interested to see which one that is, but the Neat Glen in particular really just upset my stomach. I immediately got indigestion. I got uncomfortable. I got just like, I mean, it was making bad faces. But the Buckhead Bourbon, batch 17, spectacular whiskey. If you can find one of those still, go out and hunt it down. Buy that batch of Stagg Junior because that was them producing great whiskey. Which, this is interesting. We already know the other two are batch 24C. Just goes to show you that batch 24C is not as good of quality as Buffalo Trace should be producing. We already know they're capable of making a great whiskey. Batch 17 proved that. But in the Neat Glen, let's find out what we have here. It is 24C me, so my bottle. Yep, that is my bottle of Stagg Junior 24C. Like I was describing, this was probably my least favorite of the three. It was just so stomach upsetting and just plain bad. I mean, that is just not good whiskey right there. So, I don't know what the root cause of why this batch was so bad, but I stand by my review score now, having tasted it against batch 17 again, and potentially confirmed it against somebody else's bottle of 24C. I think both the sample I was provided and this bottle were just bad. The plastic note in particular on the Bourbon Pursuit Glen, I'm really concerned about that. I wonder if that is a product of the sample jar that it went into, or if it's just also a terrible whiskey, like all the bottles of 24C have been. Obviously, that means in the Bourbon Pursuit Glen, we have the Stagg Junior 24C, the Instagrammer sample that was provided by Dirty Bourbon. Thank you again, Dirty Bourbon, for providing that sample. You know, out of respect for the fact that you sent me some of your bottle of Stagg Junior 24C, I'll have another sip of your sample. Cheers, my friend. I really wanted to like this one more than my bottle of 24C, but I gotta say, it is just as bad. So, perhaps not a case of bottle-to-bottle variation necessarily, but just a bad batch. I'd welcome feedback in this space. If anybody else has had a different experience with Stagg Junior Batch 24C, let me know down in the comments. I'm really interested to hear if there is a bottle-to-bottle variation thing going on here. But ultimately, with my palate today, I don't believe that there is. I think 24C was just a bad batch of Stagg Junior that probably should have never been released. Maybe there were marketing pressures. Perhaps the blending team is different. But at the end of the day, 24C is not a good whiskey. If you have a bottle, I would suggest trading it away for something much better at this point. And I really hope we get to see a day in which Stagg Junior batches become as great as they once were. There's been a lot of conversation on the internet that Stagg Junior kind of lost its way when it lost the Junior label. I think there were a couple of good batches after the Junior got dropped, but I generally agree with that sentiment. If you look at my Stag Hub article, which I'll drop a link to in the description, the older batches were typically much better in quality. When you look at my power ranking, which is a little drop down in the Stag Hub article, I'll show you. You can see the ones that were batch numbers before they went into the standardized system that Buffalo Trace has implemented, where they're actually putting batch numbers on the bottle itself. Back when you had to figure things out based on proof and relative bottling date and laser codes, you had to rely on systems like I implemented on amongstthewhiskey.com, which helped you identify which batch of Stagg Junior you had. So you knew which ones were good and which ones were not, which ones you could tell your friends were worth drinking. I can tell you batch 24C is not worth drinking. Batch 17 is absolutely worth drinking. I sincerely hope this was an illustrative and informative tasting for you. If you did enjoy it, please consider liking down below. If you did enjoy it, please consider liking, subscribing. I really appreciate you guys and the feedback that you're providing in the comments these days. I mean, we are on the precipice of something amazing in the whiskey world here, and you are absolutely a part of it. I thoroughly appreciate your inputs. And I look forward to continuing to be your source of truth for everything Stagg Junior. But until next time, my friends, keep it amongst the whiskey.